Chapter 161. His voice was not loud, yet it clearly reached the ears of everyone inside the mansion. Upon seeing the palace master of the Tan Palace, the faces of everyone within the mansion changed slightly, especially when they noticed Song Choma by his side. They were not unfamiliar with this guardian demon king of the Tan Palace Academy. Two powerful figures from the Four Stands realm had unexpectedly arrived at the same time. Song Yufeng, why have you brought the guardian demon king here? What is your purpose? Chan Hafeng, the elderly lady, asked with a concentrated look. Song Yufeng smiled slightly and said, I heard that Li Hao, the young master of the Divine General Mansion, possesses peerless talent. I particularly wish to see for myself and pay a visit, and I hope the lady will allow this. Upon hearing these words, the faces of the ladies of the various courtyards changed slightly, some even shocked. They had not expected that these two were also here for Li Hao. However, thinking of Li Hao's previous apprenticeship at Tan Palace Academy, they quickly understood. But just how long had the child been at Tan Palace Academy to have earned such regard from its palace master? After all, Tan Palace Academy had been in Qingzhou City for many years, and its relationship with the Divine General Mansion had always been cordial but not intimate. Such mutual relations had been quite beneficial to both parties. But now, for the sake of Li Hao, the other party had disrupted this balanced relationship. Was it because of the child's talent? The onlookers wondered to themselves. Hauer has been resting recently. If the two of you wish to see him, you certainly can, she said. Chan Hafeng originally intended to say that Hauer was recuperating from injuries, but considering the public setting, mentioning the injuries would inevitably lead to speculation on the battle that had brought shame upon the Divine General Mansion. Hearing the old lady's words, Song Yufeng felt slightly surprised. He had anticipated some persuasive effort to be necessary, yet it had been unexpectedly easy. He immediately thanked her and was about to enter the mansion when suddenly, a slight disturbance came from within. The ladies turned their heads only to see a young figure walking towards them. The youth was empty-handed, and on the collar of his outer garment at the chest, one could still see a faint trace of blood. At his feet was a familiar white-furred fox. Hauer! When Chan Hafeng turned and saw Li Hao, her eyes revealed a mixture of complexity and distress. One was her beloved son, and the other was her grandson she had only met recently but had grown quite fond of. It pained her heart. Why have you come? She asked gently and kindly. Li Hao glanced at his paternal grandmother, and while facing that kindly and gentle gaze, he inwardly sighed and then calmly stated, Grandmother, I have come to bid you farewell. At these words, Chan Hafeng was instantly stunned, and the other ladies looked on in amazement as well. Lu Yurong's eyes flashed with a hint of light as she stared at Li Hao. I am leaving, and after today, I will not return, Li Hao said with a slight bow to his grandmother. Hauer, you want to leave the Li family? Chan Hafeng was taken aback, with widened eyes showing surprise. Li Hao nodded, his gaze sweeping across the other ladies. When he saw Lu Yurong, a deep murderous intent flashed through his eyes but was quickly repressed. He knew that to attack her now would most likely be difficult, and it would only plunge him into even greater peril. His strength was not yet sufficient, needed more time to accumulate it. Hauer! At that moment, Li Muxiu, the old patriarch, along with Bian Ruxue, Li Yuanzhao and others, also hurried over. Li Muxiu quickly said, Hauer, don't be rash, speak your mind, and I will decide for you. Upon saying this, he saw Lu Yurong and his expression instantly turned cold as he sharply stated, How dare you show your face here? Apologize to Hauer immediately. Lu Yurong's face underwent a slight change, and with an aggrieved expression, she said, Uncle, the Ministry of Punishment has not yet investigated the matter. You cannot wrong me again. You! Li Muxiu gritted his teeth in anger. The veins on the back of his hand bulged. Li Hao, however, calmly stated, Second uncle, there's no need for anger. Li Muxiu was briefly stunned. Looking at him, Li Hao just smiled faintly, avoiding any harsh words. Apologies? Penitence? Some things were not resolvable with mere apologies. Only blood and life could engrave a memory, could quell one's own unrest. Grand Aunt, Ninth Aunt. Li Hao's gaze swept over everyone, and once again he bowed. I cannot thank you enough for all the care in previous days. Today, I take my leave. May we meet again in the future. He Jianlan and Jiang Xian'er's expressions changed, with He Jianlan saying, Hauer, don't be impulsive. Your father has a bit of a temper. But after all, you are father and son. Li Hao's mouth twitched slightly at these words. How was it this remark again? He shook his head without saying anything, only to suddenly sense something and look up to see a goose feather snowflake falling from the sky. Late autumn had passed, and this first snow of early winter seemed somewhat early. He withdrew his gaze from the overcast sky and focused on the steps in front of him. Then he stepped forward without another word or pause. How? Li Yuanzhao couldn't help but call out, his eyes moistening and turning red. His nose becoming increasingly sour. Li Hao's figure paused slightly, but he did not turn back. He had already said his previous advice. Bian Rushua was lost in a daze, originally. She thought that after descending the mountain and capturing the true dragon with Li Hao, she would say goodbye, never expecting to go through these astonishing changes. Suddenly, a towering figure appeared before Li Hao, enveloping him like a black cloud and obscuring his view. You want to leave? Where would you go? Li Tiangang's face was cold and frosty as he spoke. Where would he go? Li Hao pondered this question seriously, feeling briefly lost in thought. Indeed. Where? But soon he gathered his thoughts and with a smile, replied, The world is vast, and I am but a passerby. I can make my home wherever I drift. Li Tiangang flew into a rage, exclaiming, Ridiculous! You are born of the Li family, and even in death, you will be a ghost of the Li family. I no longer carry the Li surname, Li Hao reiterated coldly. Chapter 162. Li Tiangang said in a chilly voice, Then what surname do you wish to take? Upon hearing this, Li Hao was momentarily lost in thought. Yes. If not surnamed Li, then what would his own surname be? More crucially, in his previous life, he had also borne the surname Li. The heart that had until now been calm suddenly felt a wave of bitterness in his previous life. His parents died early. He had not expected that after traversing through a rebirth, even his own surname would not be preserved. Though he was born into a prominent family, he ended up in such a plight truly laughable. He took a deep breath and the frigid, icy air filled his lungs, which oddly brought him some comfort. He regained his composure and said, What surname I take has nothing to do with you. In any case, I will no longer bear the Li surname. From now on, I have nothing to do with the Li family. Do you think by saying that you can sever your ties with the Li family? Li Tiangang's gaze burned with fury as he said, The Li family raised you for so many years, and you just want to walk away like this? Li Hao looked up slightly, locking eyes with him. Then, what do you suggest? You want to leave, fine, but return everything you owe to the Li family. Li Tiangang said angrily. Li Hao said in a stern voice, And how do you suggest I do that? How do you repay us? You speak as if it's simple. The Li family's cultivation techniques you've learned. How will you repay that? The precious medicines that melted your blood for Foundation establishment have been consumed. How will you repay that? The blood flowing within you, how will you repay that? Li Tiangang demanded coldly, word by word. Li Hao was silent for a moment before saying, I can refrain from using the cultivation techniques, however many volumes I've cultivated. I will donate the same number to Listening Rain Tower. The precious medicines for Foundation establishment, I will find a way to repay you in the future. The blood essence of the great demon that you've slain, I will also repay you for that. As for this body's blood, Li Hao looked up at him directly. I've said it before, your son died a long time ago. The life I have now is my own. Now that he had entered the heavenly human realm, cultivated his own path, and could create his own cultivation techniques, even if he didn't use the other techniques, the impact on him would not be significant. Li Tiangang, overflowing with rage, laughed scornfully and said, Very well. You've reached the heavenly human realm and grown wings. I won't talk about the cultivation techniques for now. A 3,000-year-old great demon, how will you slay it? Do you even realize what realm a 3,000-year-old great demon is in? It's at least in the middle phase of the immortal realm, if not the pinnacle. Do you think just because you've entered the heavenly human realm, you are guaranteed to become immortal in the future? Li Tiangang's face showed a mocking smile. After the heavenly human realm, each step is a threshold. No matter how exceptional your talent is, it's not 100% sure you will become an unparalleled power. There was once a prodigy who entered the Grandmaster realm at the age of 19. 100 years later, he just stepped into the immortal realm. You want to delay, but I can't wait. A chill flashed in Li Hao's eyes. Then tell me, how do you want me to repay it? As Li Tiangang looked into his gaze, his heart filled with even greater fury and said, "If you want to repay, fine. I'll give you 3 years. 3 years to replace every volume you've learned with a new one. Within 3 years, bring me back the head of a 3,000-year-old great demon. With regards to the Li family's blood and talents within you, you better not waste them. Go to Heavenly Gate Pass, take over and guard it for the clan. I don't expect you to hold it for long, just guard it for 3 years and I'll consider your debt paid." "Li Tiangang, have you truly gone mad?" Li Muxiu exclaimed in shock and anger. "Do you realize what you were suggesting? Do you want to kill your own son before you're satisfied?" The others also showed signs of unease. The threat seemed too harsh. The other terms could possibly be negotiated with, but defending Heavenly Gate Pass was too difficult. That is one of the most dangerous places defended by the Li family. Located deep in the Great Yu borderlands, it sticks out like a thorn, bordered on 2 sides by the land of demons and tens of thousands of miles further, the Great Wilderness Heaven. Moreover, nearby there's a vassal state under Dayu, which, although it pays annual tribute to the Great Yu dynasty and maintains a facade of loyalty, has long been conspiring with demons to assault Heavenly Gate Pass. However, there has been no evidence to prove such conspiracies, even if evidence had been found. In the past, the vassal state had always pushed the blame onto scapegoats. Over the years, countless soldiers of the Li family have died defending Heavenly Gate Pass. Even with someone in the 4 stands realm stationed there, it was only enough for suppression. The casualty rate at that location is extremely high. In the past, the 3rd and 6th sons of the Li family both defended that place and ended up buried in its soil. Now, they want to send the young Li Hao there? Even if he's in the heavenly human realm, in that place, he would merely be a handful of yellow soil. However, they could all see that Li Tiangang's words were merely an attempt to force Li Hao to stay, not allowing him to leave. Looking into the enraged face before him, Li Hao took a deep, hard look at the other and nodded, "No problem." Li Tiangang's expression changed, surprised that Li Hao actually dared to agree. He wanted to laugh out of sheer anger and said, "Very well. Truly ignorant and fearless, do you even know what Heavenly Gate Pass is? 3 years? I really want to see if you can live for 3 years. And even if you do, what kind of shape you'll be in after 3 years." He chortled coldly, continuing, "I will withdraw all of the Li family's forces from Heavenly Gate Pass, and I will not send a single soldier to reinforce you. You want to leave the Li family behind? Then try to survive on your own. Let's see what difference you can make without the Li family, without the protection of so many soldiers. Your comfort, your arrogance, all were bought with the blood of countless others. When the time comes, you will realize that your talent and abilities are worthless in the face of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood." Upon hearing these words, Li Muxiu was fully enraged and said, "If you want to kill Hao Er, just say it directly. Why go about it this way? If Hao Er goes there, I will accompany him." "Uncle!" Li Tiangang's color changed, angrily saying, "As an elder, I have tolerated you again and again. I hope you understand that this is our family's internal affair." Chapter 163. How much longer will you indulge Hao Er? If you interfere again, don't blame me for confining you to the listening rain tower in the name of the true dragon. On hearing these words, Li Muxiu's eyes bulged with rage, and his body trembled violently. "You dare to confine me? Is this how you run the Li family?" At this moment, Li Hao fell into silence. The matters of Heavenly Gate Pass I had also heard from the second master before. Whenever mentioned, it couldn't help but bring sighs. It was the most dangerous place guarded by the Li family for Dayu. However, according to the second master, in recent years, the casualties of the Li family's children there, the accelerated extension of the Mo River, the external turmoil, and so on, it seemed that Emperor Yu was already contemplating abandoning that place to retract the troops for defense. This news, Li Tiangang before my eyes most likely knew as well, hence why he dared to speak of withdrawing the troops of the Li family. Even if he couldn't hold it and had to abandon it, the Li family would at most bear some scolding and punishment, but would not face severe punishment. After all, Emperor Yu already harbored that intention. Seeing Li Hao silent, Li Tiangang couldn't help but sneer. "What, is that all the backbone you have?" Li Hao looked up at him and suddenly, a voice reached his ear, causing a slight change in his expression. After a moment of silence, he slowly said, "Fine, you said it. 3 years. I will guard for the Li family for 3 years. After 3 years, everything I have eaten, drunk, used, including the blood flowing in my body, we will be even." Seeing Li Hao agree, Li Muxiu hastily said. How air? What nonsense are you talking about? You don't need to pay with your life for those years of food and drink. Li Hao's lips twitched slightly. Yes, why should he repay with his life? Who could have expected that the small kindness of the past would require a repayment 1,000, 10,000 times over? It was just that, deep down, he was thoroughly weary and unwilling to be bound by even the slightest fetter. You beast, you really dare to agree? Li Tiangang said furiously. Do you even know what you're saying? What will you use to defend it? With your heavenly human realm's cultivation level? You might die before even stepping into Heavenly Gate Pass. Li Hao coldly replied. I'd rather die out there than here. You! Li Tiangang was choked up with anger, unable to utter a word. I have already agreed, so step aside. Li Hao didn't waste any more words and said coldly. Li Tiangang stood frozen in place, momentarily at a loss for words, but Li Hao simply stepped past him. And then, amidst the astonished cries and urgent calls of the crowd, he crossed that threshold. He had crossed that threshold so many wanted to enter. With that step, it meant that from then on, Li Hao was no more of this world. The crowd stood dumbfounded, not knowing what to say or do. The young man's silhouette was so resolute, so decisive. Nobody had expected that this father and son would be so obstinate and stubborn. How air? How? The crowd couldn't help but call out. But the young man's figure did not pause. Step by step, he walked down the stairs of the Divine General Mansion's main gate. Li Tiangang suddenly turned around, staring at that departing silhouette, his face ashen. You will regret it! This voice reached the young man's ears, but he showed no reaction. Li Muxiu watched in a daze, suddenly feeling that the young man, once gone, seemed as if he would never return, just like Li Hao had said. From then on, he was no longer a Li. He had forsaken that surname, the most prestigious after the royal family, below heaven in this winter. He departed outside the Divine General Mansion. Song Yufeng, Song Qiuma, and many apprentices from Whitehall all heard this conversation. They all watched in astonishment at the young man who was leaving the Divine General Mansion. They had come to plead for Li Hao, but never expected that the greatest genius of the Divine General Mansion for hundreds of years would break away from this divine abode today. They wanted to persuade him, but did not know how to start. The dialogue between the father and son left them feeling a chill suddenly. A figure stepped forward from the crowd, saying to Li Hao, Brother Li Hao, have a good journey. Li Hao looked over and saw that it was Prince Jiang Hanqing. The prince was plainly dressed, without any luxurious royal attire, and had previously blended into the crowd. But at this moment, he stepped forward openly, and if an observant person were to take notice, they would surely recognize his face and status. For someone of his status to get involved in the internal affairs of the Divine General Mansion obviously wasn't good, but he did it anyway. Their eyes met, and Li Hao knew that the other was willing to do so, but he did not engage in much conversation, merely giving a cool nod, seemingly distant after all. His current status was not to be flaunted. Jiang Hanqing watched Li Hao's retreating figure, and then suddenly spoke out loud. Brother Li Hao, do you remember the poem you recited that day in the brothel? Let there be no worries about finding a confidant ahead. In this world, who doesn't recognize you? Chapter 164. Hearing the loud recitation of poetry by the young man, the faces of everyone in the Divine General Mansion slightly changed. Who in the world does not know of your excellency? Such domineering confidence. Yet so completely true, a grandmaster of the heavenly human realm at only 14, an unprecedented rarity, had now parted from their Li family. Tiangang, can't you speak to Li Hao more gently? He Jianlan felt a sour ache in her heart, thinking of the well-behaved child who had come to pay his respects early in the day, and couldn't help but say to Li Tiangang. Li Tiangang came back to his senses but remained expressionless and said nothing. Li Tiangang, you pushed Hao Er away, you drove away the most astonishing talent the Li family has seen in 1,000 years. Li Muxiu seemed to have lost all his anger at this moment, his face showing a time-worn and desolate look as he glanced deeply at Li Tiangang and said, You will definitely regret what you said today. Li Tiangang's mouth twitched slightly. The child's talent truly was astonishing, which he had seen and felt pained in his heart. But, regret it? He thought of various recent events. Then after a deep breath, he said in a low voice, I won't regret it. The one who will regret it will be him. If I can't grind down his stubbornness, those demons will. In less than 3 years, he will come back crying and begging to return. He will realize what he has abandoned today is something countless people in this world dream of obtaining. He's still young, just doesn't know how fortunate he is. As he spoke, he turned his head to look at Li Muxio and the others, and said slowly, "By the command of the Li family's true dragon, I warn you all. No one is permitted to assist him, and secret violators will be severely punished by the family law." Having said that, his expression turned cold once more and stated, "Helping him would be harming him. Don't hinder me, I will bring him back." Everyone's expressions changed slightly, not expecting his determination to be so resolute. "Xuanli." Li Xuanli started to speak, then stopped. Li Muxio's lips trembled slightly and said, "Do you realize he has not yet recovered from his injuries, and leaving today, how many eyes from all over the world will be fixed on him? Our Li family is a thorn in the side of demons, a nail in their eyes. Once this child leaves Qingzhou and this place, imagine how many demons will ambush and assassinate him along the way. The millennium-old grudge between the Li family and the demons might very well descend upon that child's head." The pupils of everyone present constricted slightly, immediately sensing the danger of the young man's journey. Li Tiangang said expressionlessly, "Second uncle, however is my child after all? If you can think of these things, so can I. I will send people to covertly protect him, and they will act if there's danger." He looked seriously at Li Muxio and added, "I am giving him 3 years, not out of impulsiveness, but to let him temper his character. This 3 years is for him to strive for. I will apply to our ancestors, and after 3 years, we will decide the true heir to the dragon again. If he can correct himself by then, he may still claim his position." Li Muxio's face trembled, looking at the departing back of the young man, his heart filled with bitterness. This child has never cared for the true dragon. After 3 years, he would probably care even less. Moreover, with the child's talent, if he seriously cultivates, he might very well reach the immortal realm in 3 years. At this moment, a figure suddenly ran forward, crossing everyone and swiftly rushing towards the young man. It was Ren Qianqian, recently recruited into the Divine General Mansion Li Hao's sword attendant. She had not yet practiced the cultivation technique of Listening Rain Tower, and although she was registered as a resident of the Divine General Mansion, no one stopped her as she decided to follow the young man. However, the girl set out alone, not carrying the black sword box with her. When Chen Hufang noticed, she came back to her senses, quickly said, "Muxio, how hasn't brought his sword? How can this be? What about Eternal Night? Hurry and bring it to him." Li Muxio was also stunned and immediately released his sense, quickly finding the black sword box within mountain and river courtyard. He immediately took it and caught up with Li Hao's sword box in hand. "However, you forgot to take your sword." Li Muxio looked at the child in front of him, wanting to say more but stopping himself. Finally, with a sorrowful expression, he said. Li Hao glanced at the old man and slightly shook his head. "Second grandpa, please don't be sad. I don't want the sword anymore. Thank grandmother for me and tell her to give it to someone else. Besides you, who in the Li family is worthy to wield the sword?" Li Muxio couldn't help saying. Li Hao's gaze fell on the black sword box, and after a moment of silence, he said slowly, "Let it be disposed of as it was intended. In any case, I won't be taking anything from the Li family again." Having said that, he turned and continued to walk away. "However, second grandpa, please go back." The young man didn't turn around but waved his hand as he spoke. Li Muxio had a complex look in his eyes, looking down at the black sword box in his hand, feeling bitterness in his heart, abandoned by 2 generations of owners. Eternal Night, it seemed, would forever slumber in the darkness. Walking down the street, Li Hao moved forward, feeling with each step his body seemed lighter, more at ease. At the entrance to the Divine General Mansion, he saw Song Yufeng and Song Qiuma, but he merely nodded slightly without saying much. He seemed unfamiliar. He did not wish to involve Tan Palace Academy. Footsteps followed from behind, growing closer, then gradually slowing down. Li Hao didn't turn back, only saying, "I'm no longer the Li young master, why follow me? You haven't been to Listening Rain Tower yet. Tell Zhao and she'll release you from the attendant contract." Ren Qianqian shook her head slightly, holding her own sword, and said, "Without the cultivation technique of Listening Rain Tower, I can learn others from you. My cultivation technique might not suit you," Li Hao said. "Besides, going to Heavenly Gate Pass, survival is an unknown. Then we shall fight demons together," Ren Qianqian said. Li Hao paused for a moment, then continued forward, his voice calm. "Then let's journey together." Joy appeared on Ren Qianqian's face, and she nodded. Quickly catching up, large snowflakes fell. Accompanied by a frost-like cold mist, the young man of distinguished status walked in the midst of the snowstorm, accompanied only by a white fox, a sword attendant, and the carefree spirit of the winds, entering Jianghu for the first time. He forgot his accompanying sword re-entering Jianghu. His hands bore no sword at all. The path to the horizon is long. From now on, only joy accompanies me. What care have I for idle sorrows? The young man suddenly sang out loud, letting out a free and easy laugh before the divine general mansion. Song Yufeng and Song Qiuma were both watching the departing youth in silence, without words. They had never imagined that after the great battle between father and son, things would become so stiff that this exceptionally gifted young man would run away from home and sever ties with the Li family. Countless people in the world would do anything to step into the divine general mansion and forge even the slightest connection with the Li family. Yet the young man had cast it away as if it were nothing. Who says heaven does not welcome guests when it sends off a person amidst the vast wind and snow? Song Yufeng murmured to himself. In front of the mansion gate, Li Yuanzhao stared blankly as Li Hao's silhouette disappeared, murmuring to himself, "From today on, does that mean Hao is without a father?" As the words of his whisper faded, his mother Xiao Yujing immediately shot him a stern glance, then turned to look at Li Tiangang, whose expression was cold and stern like a slab of iron, her brow furrowing. Standing beside Li Yuanzhao, Bian Rushue, however, trembled violently as if struck by lightning. Her eyes widening in shock, in her mind flashed scenes from many years ago, when she had followed Uncle Lin to the resplendent divine general mansion. Crying all the way in that unfamiliar environment, it was that child with eyes like stars who told her her father was in the heavens on that day. She found a new dependence amidst the pain of losing her father, and now, after so many years, the youth who once comforted and accompanied her had, before her very eyes, also lost his father. Only now, he had left, and she could not only not stay by his side but had not even spoken a word of comfort. At this thought, a sorrowful pang surged through her heart, as if pricked by a sharp thorn. Feeling deeply pained, she quickly went after him, but as the wind and snow in the world grew stronger, there was no trace of him left. Heavenly Gate Pass, located to the north of Liangzhou's borders. Liangzhou, vast and sparsely populated, with cold winters and hot summers, barren and infertile land, yet rich in mineral veins. The people here do not like farming and most engage in animal husbandry and trade, and most grain is bought and transported from other provinces, right? Now the moon shone brightly and the stars were sparse. The cold moonlight poured over the earth. In a clearing of a dense forest at the border of Liangzhou, a bonfire was lit, with 2 people and 1 fox sitting around it on the bonfire. Several tiger paws and a tiger liver were skewered on green vine sticks, roasting on the fire. The fragrance wafted through the air, indicating the amount of food clearly exceeded that for 2 people. "It's almost done. Just wait a bit more." Li Hao, patting the head of the little white fox beside his knee, said with a smile. It had been 5 days since leaving Qingzhou thanks to Renqian Qianping. They were able to rent a horse-drawn carriage that jolted them all the way to Liangzhou. After returning the carriage at the post station, they could only rely on themselves to walk the rest of the way to this borderland. Fortunately, over the past 5 days, Li Hao's injuries had already healed. In his free time, he pondered his various cultivation techniques and integrated them, creating a unique technique for himself. Having just stepped into the heavenly human realm, the haphazardly combined power he wielded could not bring out the strength of the Grandmaster realm, but after some exploration, if he were to fight again, he was confident he could easily beat his former self. As for whether he could defeat that person, Li Hao was too lazy to think about it for now. "Feng, it's almost ready." Li Hao raised his head and called towards the forest. It was Feng who had sent him a message while he was in the divine general mansion, prompting him to agree to come to Heavenly Gate Pass. Otherwise, even if he wanted to cut ties with the Li family, he wouldn't joke about his own life by coming here alone, which was tantamount to courting death. The forest was silent, without any reply. Li Hao had gotten used to this and didn't mind it at all. Suddenly, from the nearby woods came the rustling sound of movement. Li Hao looked up, his divine soul reaching out to explore, and saw a familiar figure pushing through the bushes and walking towards him. Soon, Bian Rushue, following the light of the fire, appeared before the bonfire. Seeing Li Hao, her face immediately lit up with joy, and she said, "It's great, I finally caught up with you. Why did you come here?" Li Hao asked with some surprise, frowning. "The journey here is very dangerous. I didn't encounter any demons, said Bien Rushue, gazing at the youth in front of the bonfire. Emotions she had kept under control over the past several days suddenly became hard to hold back, and her eyes reddened slightly. You accompanied me back then. Now I'm here to accompany you. Li Hao looked at her with surprise and asked, Are you not pursuing the sword path anymore? Bien Rushue was stunned for a moment, fell silent, then said, I will not give up the sword, but I want to stay by your side. Otherwise, I can't be at peace. Li Hao then understood that she felt guilty. He laughed casually and said, Silly girl, don't worry about me. I'm not as fragile as you think. I'm not like you, crying all the time. Bien Rushue, recalling the embarrassing moments when she often woke from nightmares as a child, blushed slightly and said, Let's not talk about the past. When my father was not around, you were there for me, and now I'm here for you. You want to repay me like this? Li Hao asked with a smile. Bien Rushue bit her lips slightly, not denying it. If you've chosen the sword path, don't be indecisive. With such a mindset, you won't even reach the foothills of the mountain, let alone the peak, Li Hao said, and about that favor. I don't mind it. I've accompanied you and you've also accompanied me. We're even. Bien Rushue was slightly taken aback, her eyes slightly hazy. Looking at the young man's carefree smile, she hesitated. Really? Really? Li Hao smiled frankly as the night wind caused the flames to dance. The warm yellow light illuminated Li Hao's face. By the bonfire, he said to the girl with a smile, Go back. I'm waiting for you to reach the pinnacle of the sword path when you come back. Tell me what you saw at the top. Chapter 165. Bien Rushue looked up slightly. What she saw before her was the warm and tender smile of a young man by the campfire. However, she felt that, although the smile hadn't changed, she seemed to be a very long distance away from the young man, but this feeling was fleeting. As if it were an illusion, she thought of the sword. The restless and unsettled part of her heart seemed to suddenly find a place to land. She thought of the pinnacle of swordsmanship, that ultimate legendary sword technique, in a soft voice, she said, Brother Hao, you have more talent than I do and you might even reach that place faster than me. That's not necessarily true. Li Hao opened his hands slightly and said, You see, I don't even have a sword. Bien Rushue was startled and then smirked bitterly. Without a sword, one cannot be called a swordsman, but the exquisite sword move Li Hao executed in the fierce battle with Li Tiangang was still unforgettable for her. Even though such extreme swordsmanship and immense sword intent were displayed, why did the person before her seem to care so little about swords? It seemed that this had always been the case since he was young. What exactly does Brother Hao care about? At that moment, a figure silently drifted down from the treetops, landing next to the campfire, interrupting Bien Rushue's thoughts. Her eyes, which held a trace of confusion, instantly became clear as she looked over promptly. There was an old man in a green robe with white hair and beard, his hair casually tied atop his head with an old wooden hairpin skewered through it. Now, he sat carelessly on a wooden stump by the fire, fanning the aroma of the roasted tiger meat toward his nose and clicking his tongue in approval. Without any seasonings, it's a pity you're not a chef given you can create such delicacies. I would like to be one, but I never had the chance, Li Hao said with a smile. Is it ready? It's edible now. Hearing this, Feng Bopping no longer held back and picked up a roasted tiger paw to blow on it. The tiger paw had incisions made on it, sprinkled with salt and smeared with wild herbs that Li Hao had gathered along the way, crushed and rubbed inside. Now, as a result of roasting, everything had soaked into the meat. Feng Bopping savored the meat, juice flowing. With no concern for appearances, Li Hao chuckled and drew out Ren Qianqian's sword. Using it as a meat cleaver, he cut a portion and then picked some leaves from the tree to use as a plate, handing it to Ren Qianqian. Thank you, young master. Ren Qianqian said with a gentle smile, taking it with both hands. Li Hao repeated the process, cutting meat from another tiger paw and serving it on a large mulberry leaf, waving Bien Rushue over. Bien Rushue, having hurriedly traveled day after day without proper meals or rest, suddenly felt her hunger keenly. Enticed by the aromatic smell, she walked over. She took the mulberry leaf, glanced at it without disdain, and casually broke off a twig to use as chopsticks, picking up a piece of meat. To eat, this is really delicious. As soon as she tasted the tiger meat, Bien Rushue's eyes slightly widened with amazement. It was incredibly delicious. In the sword cottage where she practiced, she had seldom indulged, according to her master. Succumbing to luxury would surely corrode the sword heart. After all, how could there be room for a sword if the mind were filled with various distractions of eating and playing? Therefore, the meals in the sword cottage were always quite ordinary. If it's good, eat more, Li Hao said with a smile. He himself picked up a tiger paw, sliced off half a piece, and tossed it to the little white fox. The rest he blew on and then began to eat. Who is this elder? During a pause in eating her meat, Bien Rushua curiously looked at Feng Bopping, not knowing when Li Hao had made the acquaintance of such a seemingly unfathomable old senior. "It's better for you not to know my name," Feng Bopping said with a light chuckle before he continued eating and drinking without paying her any more attention. He carried a flask of liquor on his belt, drank from it himself, and then passed it to Li Hao. Li Hao didn't hold back either, eating meat in one hand and drinking liquor with the other. After he swallowed it all down, the spicy and meaty flavors mingled in his stomach, eliciting an exclamation of satisfaction. Seeing Li Hao in such a state, Bien Rushua felt a bit lost. Drinking was considered the pursuit of rough men. Although most men did enjoy drinking, Li Hao was still quite young in her eyes. "Brother Hao, drink less," Bien Rushua couldn't help saying. Feng Bopping laughed loudly. "Kid, your bride hasn't crossed the threshold yet, and she has already started to manage you." Li Hao merely smiled faintly without responding to the comment, continuing to eat and drink. Bien Rushua's cheeks flushed, and seeing that Li Hao wouldn't be persuaded, she stopped trying to convince him and quietly ate her own piece of meat. In the dark forest, stars twinkled. The long night was silent. After eating their fill, everyone settled down to rest. Li Hao lay comfortably in front of the campfire, his expression peaceful and content, his mouth curving into a slight smile as he slept. Bien Rushua sat by the fire, occasionally adding a stick of firewood and occasionally gazing at the young man with a slightly furrowed brow. Having come out from the divine general mansion, having suffered such serious injuries, and having broken with her father, why did he appear to sleep so soundly? What was he dreaming about? Who was in his dreams? The girl didn't know. She slowly retracted her gaze, staring at the dancing sparks of the campfire in a trance. Birds startled into flight within the woods, and the dawn's first light gradually approached. The campfire had died down. A new day had arrived. On the edge of the forest, on the road through Liangzhou, Li Hao bid farewell to Bien Rushua, telling her to return home without worries. Having said all that could be said, Bien Rushua didn't insist any longer. Carrying her sword, she turned back 3 times, only to see that the young man was no longer lingering in place. Thus, without looking back again, she headed straight down the road she had come from. All the way back, deep down, she felt a sense of relief, since Li Hao did not need her company. She could then devote herself wholeheartedly to pursuing her own path of swordsmanship. "Brother Hao, I will definitely reach the pinnacle of the sword path, and then I'll tell you what I've seen," the girl murmured to herself, her gaze gradually becoming steady. Continuing along the official road, the cypress trees gradually became sparse, and in some areas where the cypresses had been obviously destroyed and trampled, there had been no repairs or replanting. The official road also became increasingly dilapidated, with some parts even cracked open, leaving behind thick indentations as if a large python had traversed it, crushing it as it passed. Ahead lies the Dragon Pass Road. Feng Bopping's eyes were also slightly grave. The Dragon Pass Road extended from the border's official road like a sharp spike, penetrating thousands of miles away, with Heavenly Gate Pass and Kanjia City, where the Li family's army was stationed, at its end. The Dragon Pass Road was the essential route to Heavenly Gate Pass. The road was so long that it took a day's ride on horseback. It was the first emperor of Dayu who, thousands of years ago, with the ancestors of the Li family, fought and opened up the territory step by step. Along this path, with this road, the Dayu's army could at any time make a long march directly into northern Cold Country, which lay outside of Heavenly Gate Pass. The northern Cold Country was one of the 6 neighboring nations subdued by Dayu, becoming a vassal state, but now, as the Dayu dynasty declined from its glory, these once vassal states seemed to show signs of restlessness. Li Hao gazed into the distance, faintly seeing a vast white road stretching straight out. That was quick. Li Hao sighed and then continued forward. Before long, they encountered an elderly man and his grandson carrying baskets of medicinal herbs on the official road ahead of them. Although Li Hao, with the little white fox, and Ren Qianqian were walking casually, their pace was still faster than that of the grandfather and grandson, and they slowly caught up with and then overtook them. The grandfather and grandson had noticed Li Hao and Ren Qianqian from a distance, revealing a cautious and even somewhat nervous look in their eyes. Despite the wide and deserted official road, they still unconsciously stepped aside to avoid them. Only when they saw that Li Hao did not pay them any attention did the grandfather and grandson breathe a sigh of relief. They followed slowly at a far distance, yet dared not show anything out of the ordinary. But this behavior was already strange enough in Li Hao's eyes, as the local people seemed to be very vigilant and fearful of strangers. "Young man, are you going further ahead?" Just as they were about to enter the Dragon Pass Road, suddenly an old voice called out from behind. Li Hao stopped, turned his head, and looked at the grandfather and grandson with a slight frown, surprised that they would initiate a conversation. He smiled and said, "Can't I continue forward?" The old man with a basket full of medicinal herbs looked at Li Hao and then at Ren Qianqian. Thinking to himself that they must not be demons but rather descendants of a noble family out on a training journey, he sighed inwardly and said to Li Hao, "Young man, beyond here lies the Dragon Pass Road." Li Hao looked at him with a hint of confusion. Seeing that Li Hao had not yet understood, the old man continued with a sigh, "Once you reach the Dragon Pass Road, you can't go any further. That place is full of demons." "Demons?" Li Hao was surprised, exchanged a glance with Ren Qianqian, and then asked, "The Dragon Pass Road is still within the territory of our Daiyu, right? Beyond the end of it at Heavenly Gate Pass is where demons dwell." "Heavenly Gate Pass?" The old man appeared momentarily stupefied before shaking his head and saying, "What Heavenly Gate Pass? There's nothing there but mountains of corpses and a sea of blood, nothing but the intense stench of decay and bloodshed." With that, he glanced at the sky, seeming to realize it was getting late, and said right away, "Young man, you want to exterminate demons and uphold justice, which is admirable, but this is no place for you to play. You'd better leave quickly before it gets dark. This official road won't be safe." After saying so, he took his grandson's hand and, carrying the medicinal herbs, continued walking forward. Only the young grandson carrying the small basket kept looking back from time to time. Once they were a kilometer away, the young grandson suddenly said, "Grandpa, it looks like they went in." "What?" The old man was shocked, turning his head to look, but on the official road there was no longer any sign of the young man and woman. He couldn't help but sigh deeply and said, "No use advising those bent on courting death. On Dragon Pass Road." Li Hao and Ren Qianqian continued to walk at a leisurely pace, but before long, Li Hao's expression subtly changed and he stopped, turning to look in the direction of the old man and his grandson had traveled. "Young master." Ren Qianqian was puzzled. Li Hao didn't speak but simply looked around and noticed a wooden stick. He bent down to pick it up and casually sent a wave of sword chi flying with the rough stick. The sword chi was like a gentle breeze, silently sweeping by but rushing furiously forward. As if stimulated by the breeze, it brushed past the slowly toiling grandfather and grandson on the official road, lifting hairs at their temples as if a warm breeze had swept from behind them, and the breeze traveled ahead, extending over 20 li. There, a demon resembling a crocodile lay in ambush by the roadside, poised to strike. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew along the official road. The demon, sensing something, pupils contracting, tried to move, but its body violently trembled. Then, from its forehead to its body, it split open, with blood and entrails scattering all over the ground. Li Hao smiled faintly, tossing the stick casually to the side of the road, then clapping his hands, he continued onward. Ren Qianqian didn't understand what had just happened but didn't ask any further questions. Li Hao would occasionally do something strange on their journey, and she had grown accustomed to it. As they delved deeper into Dragon Pass Road, Li Hao encountered more rotting corpses and bones of demons, now merely white bones, left unattended. Along the way, he also came across demons lying on Dragon Pass Road, deeply asleep, turning what was once a road evaded by demons into their own comfortable bed. With these demons, Li Hao showed no mercy. There was no need for Elder Feng to make a move. He dealt with them effortlessly. Throughout their journey, Li Hao's expression became somber as he finally understood why the old man had said what he did. The Dragon Pass Road, established thousands of years ago, seemed now almost abandoned. In theory, over the years, the Li family should have had people guarding this place. Why then had it become like this? Walking intermittently, Li Hao, accompanied by Ren Qianqian and the little white fox, finally arrived at the end of Dragon Pass Road. Chapter 166. At the end of Dragon Pass Road is Kanjia City. Heavenly Gate Pass is outside the city. Kanjia City, built against a cliff, is expansive. Its city walls are towering and sturdy, reaching into the clouds. Inside are magnificent towers, arrow towers, and bustling residential districts. The city is extremely lively and prosperous, and it is also Grand Liang State's border trading post with northern cold country with heavy traffic of horses and carriages, but that was 800 years ago. Now, there is only a small mound left. The mound is inscribed with the characters Kanjia. This is now the city. A sea of military tents surrounds the mound, firmly ensconced around it as the center. On the perimeter of the tents, several battle flags are planted. The flags flutter in the cold, whistling wind, bearing the ancient characters. Heavenly Origin. These are the flags of the Li family, the 5 great divine general mansions, each with its own title, such as the Wang family's Tianzhou Divine General Mansion and the Li family's is the Heavenly Origin Divine General Mansion. At this moment, a cold wind howls and dust rolls across the land. At the edge of a cliff behind the military tents, there are graves of varying sizes with shabby, wooden carved tablets inserted haphazardly. They serve as both headstones and markers for those buried. Beneath, chink, nearby, several soldiers in damaged armor are digging holes with iron shovels. Soon, a few more arrive with a stretcher which carries a hand, a mangled thigh, torn armor, and a dented helmet. Once the holes are ready, they place these remnants inside and then fill them with sand. Afterward, they find a tree, cut a piece off, split it into a wooden tablet, and use their fingers to etch a few words before planting it atop the grave. On some stretchers, there are only a few fingers and fallen boots. These too are buried, and the wooden tablet is inscribed with the words, Li family soldiers. The cold wind silently sweeps in, blowing through the military tents, weaving through the gaps between them, squeezing out sobs of lamentation. Li Hongzhuang, clad in bright red armor, stands silently in front of the graves, her face expressionless. Most of the wooden tablets here bear no names because the battles with the demons have been too fierce, and preserving a whole body is already quite difficult. After the new graves are all properly filled in, she extends her hand, and a deputy offers her a jug of strong liquor. With a flick of her finger, she kicks out the cork and pours the alcohol over these graves. The last mouthful she drinks herself. Thus, she shared a drink with these brave soldiers. Without giving another glance, she turns and leaves. She has been doing this for 20 years, and for 20 years she has witnessed this scene. From the deputy who passed her liquor to now commanding the army, because the 3rd brother and the 6th brother who once helped her with the liquor have both fallen in succession. So, although a woman, she still chose to step forward to hold up the sky for Grand Liang State. Li Hongzhuang is the youngest daughter of Li Tianzong. She has 9 brothers renowned throughout the world, each extraordinary and revered by all. Among them, the most prodigious was Li Junyi, but he also died over a decade ago. At that time, she was stationed at the frontier pass and could not leave her post, so she could not attend the funeral of the 9th brother whom she played with in the courtyard since childhood. Her tears could only fall on this battlefield. She still remembers her father saying that when naming her, he hoped she would find a good family to marry into, to then raise children and take up scholarly pursuits instead of the sword, to be spared the hardship of slaying demons. But since childhood, seeing the wounds on the soldiers who came back to report military news and the empty tablets in the ancestral shrine, she knew she could not abandon her sword, so she trained diligently, taking a master and learning peerless techniques. Later, she descended the mountain to join the worldly affairs, wielding her 3-foot-long blade to slay the millions of demons outside the pass. Here, she has been fighting continuously for 20 years. 20 years of harsh weather and battle have left her once delicate skin as rough as sandpaper. Her once flowing hair, now pinned under her helmet, has long since been soaked with blood from fights with demons and grease, becoming dirty and smelling faintly of blood. These are things women find hardest to tolerate, but she has become accustomed to them. Aside from her appearance, which remains as stunningly beautiful as ever, nothing else has changed. But her once gentle and clear eyes have turned as cold and sharp as the stars of winter. Commander, the tally is complete. 28 demons slain. 7 dead, 12 injured. Another deputy reports as he approaches Li Hongzhuang. Li Hongzhuang is expressionless. She had witnessed the earlier battle and already had a rough understanding of the casualties. She simply says, "The family sent a letter saying that reinforcements will arrive soon. Once they do, we are to withdraw and rotate out. Have there been any reports on the whereabouts of the reinforcements?" The deputy shakes his head slightly, about to speak when suddenly, a horn sounds from outside the military tents. Both of their expressions change, and they move swiftly, leaping into the air from their vantage point in the sky. They see a few dots approaching from the direction of Dragon Pass Road. As they draw closer, they make out a young man and woman, along with a white fox. How could there be people coming from Dragon Pass Road? Both are taken aback and quickly fly toward them. They are stationed at Heavenly Gate Pass, which has received some reinforcements over the years, but not many. It seems there has been some intention to abandon Heavenly Gate Pass. Dragon Pass Road, however, has long been lost to the demons. Even the troops that came to reinforce usually took a detour around Dragon Pass Road. Some were already lost in the sands of Dragon Pass Road, suffering heavy losses. A military camp? Chapter 167. At this moment, Li Hao and Ren Qianqian approached, both with puzzled expressions on their faces. They had assumed they would find Kanjia City at the end of their journey, but instead, they saw military tents everywhere, the ground riddled with pits and cracks, some unprocessed demon corpses, and tattered military flags. It was, unexpectedly, a gruesome battlefield. Li Hao then heard the sound of bugles and saw two figures descending from the sky. "Who are you?" Li Hongzhuang looked at the young man before her, feeling that his features seemed somewhat familiar, and frowned in confusion. Li Hao was about to speak, but then fell silent. He had said he would no longer carry the Li surname. How should he introduce himself? His gaze was a bit lost, but he quickly thought of a name and said, "My surname is Ji. You can call me Ji Hao. I am here to relieve you as reinforcements." Ji Hao. Li Hongzhuang and the deputy had never heard this name, but upon hearing Li Hao's next words, joy filled their hearts. They looked past Li Hao to the distance behind him. "Where are the others?" The two were confused to see nothing behind Li Hao. "I am the one," said Li Hao. The two were stunned. Their excitement immediately deflated as they looked at Li Hao. "Just you?" "Not just me," Li Hao continued. "This is my sword attendant, and this one is my little companion, the three of us." As for Feng, he had already concealed himself nearby and was the reason Li Hao dared to come to Heavenly Gate Pass, however. He could not reveal himself to the people before him. Feng's identity was looked down upon and spurned by the world, a sensitive matter. Only his private dealings with the second master and him were known to no one else. Otherwise, it would have caused a great stir. Upon hearing Li Hao's words, Li Hongzhuang and the deputy were dumbfounded, their weathered, numb faces showing a hint of astonishment. Looking around again, indeed, there were no other presences, just this young man? Reinforcements? Li Hongzhuang exclaimed in anger. "Are you joking? After waiting for so long, longing for so long. All they get is a teenager." Rage flared in her heart. Li Hao shook his head and said earnestly, "Not at all. I truly am here to take over. For the next 3 years, I will be guarding this place until I die." "You think you can guard for 3 years?" Li Hongzhuang was so angry she almost laughed. One person guarding a solitary city. Even she wouldn't dare make such a claim. Miss Hongzhuang might really be insane. Li Hongzhuang no longer paid attention to Li Hao and instead said to the deputy, "Send a message back on horseback and inquire what Li Tiangang means by this. Is he truly ready to abandon us? Or does he have another intent?" The deputy acknowledged and was about to leave. Suddenly, a figure swooped in and landed in front of them. It was an old man wearing battle armor, his hair gray and his gaze steady and contained. He first glanced at Li Hao, then bowed to Li Hongzhuang, saying, "Mississippi." Li Hongzhuang felt the same immortal energy emanating from the man and looked closely, yet she could not recognize who he was. The deputy beside her seemed to have recognized him and exclaimed, "Are you General Li He?" "Li He." Upon hearing the name, Li Hongzhuang pondered briefly, then her face showed surprise. Li He had already made a name for himself outside when she was still a child training in the martial fields. He was of the older generation of the Li family, a peer of her second uncle and others, but he was born to a concubine in that generation of children from concubines. Li He was one of the outstanding few. "Miss Hongzhuang, may I have a word with you in private?" Li He said. Li Hongzhuang was slightly perplexed, but she still followed him as they flew off to the side. Li Hao and the deputy remained where they were. Li Hao wasn't surprised by the sudden appearance of the elderly man, although it was their first close encounter. He had been followed by the other party all the way from Qingzhou for 5 days already, according to what Feng mentioned. This was most likely a person sent by Li Tiangang to secretly protect him. Li Hao felt nothing about this. On the road, most of the demons were dealt with by Feng and himself. Once his injuries healed, demons below the immortal realm wouldn't require Feng's intervention at this moment. While the other party was having a private chat with that young ant, Li Hao also asked the deputy, "Isn't Kanjia City at the end of Dragon Pass Road? How long will it take to get there?" The deputy spoke gravely. "The place where you are standing now is Kanjia City." Li Hao was stunned and looked at him in surprise. Then he looked around. Where was the city? With hundreds of years of warfare and frequent fierce attacks by demons, Kanjia City has been weather-worn and has sustained too many serious damages. It no longer has the strength to repair the city walls or to rebuild the enchanted patterns. The entire city has been obliterated. The deputy said, now only that place remains, which can be considered a city, and it's also where we stand guard. With that, he pointed to a small mound not far away. Li Hao looked over and was taken aback. The small mound was only a few meters high and could be easily crumbled with a slap. This was Kanjia City? He was aware of the bitter warfare at the frontier pass, but he hadn't imagined it to be this dire. An entire city had been forcefully reduced to flat ground. So you're saying, when you're stationed here with nothing to shield yourselves, you just withstand the demon attacks? Li Hao asked. The deputy, with an emotionless face, replied, the only wall we have are our bodies. Upon hearing this, Li Hao fell silent and said no more before long. Li Hongzhuang and Li He both returned. Li Hongzhuang looked at Li Hao with a complex expression, saying, so you're actually Hao heir? Li Hao glanced at the elderly Li He, guessing that he must have told this young aunt about the matter. It's me. Now you believe it, right? You can withdraw your troops now. Li Hongzhuang's eyes were complex and filled with sorrow as she said, how could seventh uncle be so heartless? It was only a minor disagreement. Why did it turn out like this? What about fifth uncle, second uncle, and my eldest sister-in-law? Don't they care? Li Hao shook his head slightly, not wishing to bring up these matters again. Hao heir, you're too impulsive. You should hurry back, or you'll die if you stay here. Li Hongzhuang said. No wonder she felt a resemblance to the young man earlier. Although it was their first encounter, she did not want to see her nephew act foolishly. It's all right. Li Hao gave a faint smile and said, dying here, I can at least be considered a martyr. Dying elsewhere, I would be nothing. Why are you so stubborn, child? Your father wouldn't actually kill you. Li Hongzhuang said with a sorrowful face. Li Hao shook his head and replied, and it's getting late, you should retreat as soon as possible. I heard these soldiers have been defending this place for many years. They should go back and see their wives, children, and mothers. Upon hearing this, the deputy beside him trembled, and his numb, cracked face seemed slightly moist. Li Hongzhuang fell silent for a moment, then shook her head. Others may retreat, but I won't. She looked up at the small mound behind her. Although it could no longer be considered a city, this was the place her third and sixth brothers had defended with their lives. She wanted to fight here until the last moment of her life. The heroic spirits of the soldiers here still need someone to accompany them. Li Hongzhuang's eyes were sharp and earnest as she slowly said, I was planning to stay and continue the fight with the reinforcements once they arrived, but since it's only you now, Aunt will stay here and fight the demons with you. We'll kill as many as we can. This is the land of the Dayu dynasty and the place our Li family has guarded for many years. Unless by imperial decree, we shall not yield a single inch. Her gaze emitted a sharp glint and her female figure stood tall like a great wall. Chapter 168. The news of the troop withdrawal spread, and many soldiers who had been desperately resting and healing in their tents stumbled out in a daze. Only when several lieutenants loudly and repeatedly announced did a semblance of life begin to emerge on their numb faces. Followed by an outpouring of mournful wails and sobs, many soldiers held their heads and wept bitterly, while others ran straight to the mass graves, found their former comrades in arms, laughed and cried, and then scooped up a handful of the yellow earth in front of the graves to hide in their armor to take home, reporting to the commander. The entire Bloodshot army of the Red Character Camp, which numbered 100,000, is now down to 9,623. All have regrouped, awaiting your orders. A middle-aged lieutenant, a collateral member of the Li family, came before Li Hongzhuang, his voice hoarse but resolute as he spoke. His eyes, however, were already moist. Li Hongzhuang's face, as pale as the moon, trembled slightly, and her gaze swept over the vice-general before her to the faces behind him, haggard, pale, yet filled with tears of hope. Finally, her gaze settled on the distant mass graves. The remaining 90,000 had already been laid to rest here. They were troops she had personally trained one by one. The vast expanse of graves held not just 90,000, but also those from the battalions led by her third and sixth brothers, buried in this land as far as the eye could see. Even the normally stoic Li Hongzhuang couldn't help but feel her eyes reddening at this moment. She controlled her emotions, took a deep breath, and shouted, I hereby declare, the Bloodshot army begins its journey home today. The phrase going home lingered in the ears of 9,632 soldiers, tears swelling in their eyes. All of the Bloodshot army received. The three lieutenants, along with all soldiers, roared in unison. By all, they included the souls of the more than 90,000 buried here, whose spirits they would bring home as well. Finally, They could embark on the journey back home amidst the excited and tearful voices. A lieutenant stepped forward, bowed to Li Hongzhuang, and then asked, "Commander, what about our reinforcements?" "Reinforcements?" Li Hongzhuang turned to Li Hao beside her and said, "He is here to replace you as reinforcements." The lieutenant looked at Li Hao, his body trembling. Were they really being replaced by this child? "Commander, this..." "No more questions. Go on, go home early. It's hard to travel when it gets dark," Li Hongzhuang said, her expression returning to stern and indifferent. Seeing this, the lieutenant dared not say more. He nodded, took another look at Li Hao to imprint the young man's appearance in his memory. The conversation between the two was overheard by the other soldiers, who, after their initial excitement, were shocked. They were all retreating, and this place was being left to a child? Many soldiers, anxious, cried out for an explanation. Others said that if that was the case, they would stay as well, but Li Hongzhuang just kept a cold face and did not respond. Under the shouting of several lieutenants, everyone was eventually sent away to gather their armor and equipment and then set off for home. Li Hao silently watched as the soldiers passed by, smelling the dust on these veterans and the strong scent of blood. The little white fox crouched at his feet, very well behaved. Ren Qianqian, on the other hand, held her sword and stood quietly behind Li Hao, the young girl. Seeing the scars, the damaged armor, and the bent blades of these soldiers, felt her heart quake and tremble, her eyes reddening. "Commander, aren't you leaving?" Another deputy looked at Li Hongzhuang and couldn't help but ask. Li Hongzhuang shook her head slightly. "You all go first. I'll come later. No need to wait for me." She knew that if she said she would stay here, more than half of these soldiers would also want to stay with her, even if she tried to drive them away. After all, they had fought side by side for years. How could they easily speak of abandonment? Hearing these words, the deputy hesitated, then glanced at Li Hao, still unable to understand why someone who appeared to be a wealthy young master had been sent here as reinforcements to guard this lonely wasteland city. But without Li Hongzhuang's explanation, they could not guess the reasons. Military orders were like mountains. They could only be executed as over 9,000 people left. The camp suddenly became tranquil and empty. Only Li Hongzhuang, Li Hao, Ren Qianqian, and a little fox remained. Li's whereabouts were unknown. He had told Li Hongzhuang privately that he would only take action in secret, and would only do so if Li Hao's life was in danger, and not for anything else. Li Hongzhuang had nothing to say to that. She had learned of Li Hao and his seventh brother's matters through Li He, but as she had not been directly involved, she didn't know the specifics. Her only thought was to defend this lonely city. Besides explaining Li Hao's situation, Li He also conveyed a message to her. That was, with smoke and fire rising everywhere in Dayu, and demons causing chaos in various places, Emperor Yu was already considering temporarily abandoning and setting aside Heavenly Gate Pass. They would reclaim it when Dayu regained its might in the future. Thus, if this place were to fall, they would not blame anyone, and if there were any punishments to be made, Li Tiangang would bear them. Since Li Tiangang had made great contributions in northern Yen, at most he would receive a reprimand, have some of his salary docked. The so-called punishment was nothing more than a show for other officials. In other words, this place had already become an area that was forsaken. There would be no more reinforcements coming. Li He had informed her that Li Hongzhuang could leave at any time and should not lose her life here. But leaving? Li Hongzhuang looked at the dark expanse of tombs. Before her eyes were the scenes of her third brother and sixth brother who had once drunk and fought here, sacrificing their lives, and every inch of this territory was stained with the blood of their soldiers. Emperor Yu wanted to abandon it. Her seventh brother wanted to abandon it. But she did not want to abandon it. Li Hongzhuang took a deep breath, reined in her emotions, and walked into the camp. Although those soldiers had left, some tents had not been completely taken down, and were left here to serve as a decoy, making the demons believe they had a larger force. Find any tent you like. The conditions here are poor. Ever since the city was breached, there have been no civilians here. They were all relocated more than a decade ago. Li Hongzhuang casually said to Li Hao, then walked straight into the camp. Li Hao nodded, looked around, and then saw in the distance the uneven mounds of graves. He led Ren Qianqian and the little white fox over, his gaze sweeping over the names or unified titles engraved on wooden plaques. The cold wind blew, giving Li Hao a bone-chilling sensation. Are these all heroes who died in battle here? Ren Qianqian's pretty face paled. She covered her mouth slightly and said with a tremble, with her own eyes, she saw not just 100,000 but countless tombs. The shock was indescribable. The little white fox that liked to jump around everywhere was also motionless, sitting quietly at Li Hao's feet, silently watching. Li Hao fell into silence for a while. He came here just to repay a debt of his own flesh and blood. Once 3 years were up, the debt would be repaid. However, looking at the numerous soldiers here, he suddenly felt that besides repaying the debt of flesh and blood, there might be another meaning to coming here. During these 3 years, it seemed he should do something else. It's a pity that his cultivation level is still too weak. At the Celestial Master Realm, one could establish a sect within the realm, but in this perilous frontier pass, one could perish at any moment, and he still needed Feng's secret protection only by reaching the 3 immortal realms. Would he have the power to protect himself? My cultivation is improving too slowly. Li Hao's eyes deepened. Although entering the heavenly human realm at 14 was shockingly prodigious, for his current situation it was still not enough. He needed to become stronger and improve quicker. Li Hao took a deep breath, left the graveyard, and came to the camp. He searched the other tents but couldn't find any food or drink. As he walked by, he saw the figure of Li Hongzhuang sitting on a small mound marked Kanjia City, wiping her sword's edge. Elder Hongzhuang. Li Hao called out and walked over. Li Hongzhuang slightly raised her eyebrows and looked at the approaching youth, frowning. You should call me aunt. I'm no longer a member of the Li family, Li Hao said. Li Hongzhuang thought of Li He's words. Her expression darkened slightly, and she asked, why has it turned out this way? Li Hao shook his head slightly, not wanting to bring it up, and asked, it's almost night. Are you hungry? I'll go find something to eat. Night is approaching, and demons roam about. It's best if you don't leave on your own, Li Hongzhuang said. She knew that Li He would protect Li Hao in the shadows, but she did not want Li Hao to recklessly brave danger. Li Hao looked up to see the moon rising and the stars beginning to shine. He smiled faintly, turned away from the small mound, and, leading Ren Qianqian and the little white fox, he aimlessly strolled through the camp, weaving in and out of the tents. The tents were tidied up cleanly, but some broken armor and rotten smelly clothes were left behind. Li Hao found a cooking area where he rummaged and found some cans of salt. With a smile, he summoned his divine soul, roaming in all directions, and soon found a demon beast in the wilderness around the camp. He bent down to pick up a broken blade fragment from the ground and tossed it like skipping a stone. The shard flew out, piercing through the air instantly, appearing 30 li away, and with a thrust, it pierced accurately through the brain of the demon beast. The beast's body trembled twice and then lost its life. Using the power of object manipulation, Li Hao drew its corpse over. This was a demon beast weighing about 3 tons. Resembling a pig or a lion with protruding tusks, Li Hao took Ren Qianqian's spare sword, used it as a butcher knife, and quickly processed the creature's insides, then cut it into pieces. Qianqian helped with lighting a fire. Okay. Over the days of their journey, Ren Qianqian had grown accustomed to assisting Li Hao. She nodded, found some firewood around, and soon started a bonfire. Li Hao had already prepared the demon beast by then, selecting the best parts and using sharpened sticks or broken spears from the ground to skewer the meat and roast it over the fire. With salt and seasonings, Li Hao kept the cooking simple, but as the sizzling fat from the roasting meat dripped down, a delicious fragrance wafted through the air. While the demon meat was roasting, Li Hao went to a tent. He examined the black and yellow patterned tent for a moment, packed it away, then used his sword to cut it, trimming it into several neat pieces of cloth. He then made a brush from the demon beast's fur and, using its blood as ink, began to paint on the cloth. What are you doing? Li Hongzhuang, lured by the scent, had walked down from the mound and silently approached the bonfire. She unexpectedly asked Li Hao, who was busying himself with his task. Li Hao looked up at her, smiled, and said, your Bloodshot army has withdrawn. Along with the military flags, I'm crafting a new war banner. Not all of my flags were taken, some were left here, Li Hongzhuang said. Li Hao smiled faintly. Those are yours, this war banner is mine. Oh. Li Hongzhuang looked puzzled. By that time, Li Hao had also finished writing. He released his power, drying the blood on the cloth, then beckoned with his hand, extending his power to manipulate objects several li into the forest. Cutting down several trees and drawing them forth, the trees were quickly whittled into poles. Li Hao wrapped them with excess cloth at one end, binding them there, and planted the other end into the ground, erecting them. Thus, a makeshift war banner was created. The cloth hung down, fluttering in the night wind. 2 large characters written in demon beast's blood swayed and revealed themselves. Hao Yan. Li Hongzhuang stood there stunned for a while, then looked towards Li Hao. Are you really of the 15 Li realm? Li Hao shook his head slightly. I'm in the heavenly human realm, he said truthfully. Li Hongzhuang's pupils constricted slightly and she froze on the spot. Heavenly human realm? Li He had not informed her of Li Hao's cultivation, only of some incidents in the household, she, spending most of her time at the frontier pass and largely cut off from the news within the realm, was busy guarding against demons every day, with little care for the affairs within the realm. Chapter 169. 14 years old and already in the heavenly human realm? Li Hongzhuang still remembered the year and month when Li Hao was born, which was also the year her 9th brother died in battle. It had been 14 years since then. Li Hongzhuang also remembered that even a prodigy like Li Juni was 17 before he stepped into the celestial master realm, and now the youth before her had achieved it at just 14, a full 3 years ahead. With such talent, you must be the true dragon of the Li family's generation, right? Li Hongzhuang came back to her senses and couldn't help but ask, such a treasure, and they left him outside the heavenly gate pass? What was her 7th brother thinking? True dragon. Li Hao's lips curled slightly as he smiled and said, talent is just that, nothing to be amazed by. The Li family's true dragon isn't anything remarkable, it's only when you have genuine and solid strength that you're truly noteworthy. Li Hongzhuang spoke speechlessly. That's easy for you to say when you're not lacking anything. What do you mean talent is just that? It's easy to dismiss talent while standing on the sidelines. Reaching the 15 Li realm might indeed be a result of talent and clan cultivation, but reaching the heavenly human realm isn't something that can be easily explained by talent alone. It requires a 1 in 10,000 kind of enlightenment and realization. 1 in 10,000 isn't much, Li Hao said indifferently. Among the sons of the Li family, having talent that is 1 in 10,000 isn't surprising. But your kind of unprecedented and peerless talent might be 1 in billions among the warriors of Dayu spanning 1,000 years. Li Hongzhuang couldn't help but say. Li Hao slightly shook his head, no longer wishing to discuss this matter with her. He simply waved the simple banner in his hand and said, how does this look? Not that great, Li Hongzhuang commented after a glance, speaking truthfully. Li Hao laughed, acknowledging that it was indeed haphazardly made from tent fabric and certainly not impressive or refined, yet he hoped that even so, this banner would still deter the demons. Li Hongzhuang looked at the meat roasting on the grill and said, I've eaten lion hoof demon before, it didn't use to taste this good. That's because it wasn't made by me. Li Hao said with a smile, his eyes showing the earnestness and confidence of a chef. Li Hongzhuang gave him a glance but didn't say anything. She just gazed at the flickering campfire, and in those numbed, indifferent eyes accustomed to battle, a glint of light seemed to emerge. Cooking skill experience 182. Cooking skill experience is full. Please upgrade as soon as possible. The cooking ended and 2 notifications flashed before Li Hao's eyes, a common occurrence for him now. Cooking was his only artistic skill currently at the 6th stage, but the experience was already full, and only with a spiritual awakening of the mind could he advance to the 7th stage. However, he had yet to find the method to such an awakening. This was different from the need for sufficient focus and passion to reach the 3rd stage. Simply being willfully fond was enough then. It also required a certain level of detachment, similar to establishing a core as a grandmaster, but in life. It's easy to talk about likes. Detachment, however, is more difficult. Li Hao was still exploring the path of transcending in the art of cooking. He had previously checked the tents in each camp as expected of a frontier outpost. There were no chessboards, no paper for painting, and even the few inkstones and brushes to be found seemed to be kept for recording military intelligence and sending messages. At the moment, he possessed 6 different artistic skills: chess Tao at the 5th stage, art of painting at the 5th stage, and fishing Tao at the 5th stage, as well as poetry and books at the 3rd stage, musical rhythm at the 3rd stage, and cooking at the 6th stage, without reaching a state of transcendence and spiritual awakening. His physical body path and swordsmanship were also stuck at the 6th stage, unable to advance further. The immediate task was to condense an art form to the point of transcendence and spiritual awakening to reach the 7th stage. Li Hao thought it over and, given the rudimentary conditions here, chess Tao and art of painting could only be put on hold for now. Aside from cooking, fishing was the most suitable skill to attempt a breakthrough after reaching the 15 Li realm. Li Hao no longer depended on a fishing rod to fish. With a rod, he could only catch small demons in the Power Passage realm or Zhou Tian realm. Great demons were very difficult to hook unless it was truly an unexpected catch. Without a fishing rod or line, Li Hao could likely Mu Xiao condense his own energy into a line to fish in all directions. It wasn't necessary to have a lake to be considered fishing. Mountains, wilderness, anywhere where creatures could be caught could accumulate fishing experience. Just as children might use hooks to catch frogs in the fields or entice eels from their burrows, it too is a form of fishing. What is fishing? To lie in wait and strike. Li Hao also considered learning new artistic skills like carving, but he currently lacked not for skill points, and besides, carving until the third stage would still require a passion of the heart to advance further, which would take some time. In this dangerous borderland, he had to quickly elevate himself to the immortal realm to ensure he had the strength to fight alone. At that moment, the roasted meat was ready. Li Hao's thoughts returned as he took off the cooked meat, first handing a portion to Li Hongzhuang. He then sliced off pieces to give to Ren Qianqian and the little white fox before finally picking up a piece and starting to eat himself. Li Hongzhuang took it, thanked him briefly, and proceeded to cut it up neatly with her own dagger, skewering a piece with the tip and putting it in her mouth. There was a noticeable pause in Li Hongzhuang's chewing, followed by a faster pace. Not bad. She nodded slightly, her expression mildly approving, but her eyes revealed satisfaction. Li Hao smiled and, while eating, asked, "Do you really intend to stay and defend this place to the death?" Perhaps due to many years in the military, Li Hongzhuang's behavior and posture were quite manly, and even her sitting position betrayed none of the genteel grace she displayed in childhood, aside from sword practice. When she would sit and stitch peonies with a graceful charm, she tore off a piece of sinew casually and said, "Defending to the death is a stretch. I'm just accompanying these brothers a bit further on their journey, and incidentally, I'll slay some more demons without reinforcements. This place will eventually fall, it's just a matter of how many I can take down." As she spoke, a sharp glint of harsh coldness inadvertently flashed in her eyes. Li Hao nodded, said no more, and lowered his head to finish his own portion of meat. After filling his stomach, he took another portion, wrapped it in leaves, and set it aside for foam. He then got up, patted his behind, picked up the several rough banners he had made, and headed out of the camp. Along the way, the war banners were planted at the edges of the campsite. There were 4 in total, each placed in a broad angle. The banners, though made from the camp's materials, bore strong and powerful characters. After all, he was of the poetry and books third stage. Li Hao looked over at them and smiled. In comparison to the Blood Shah Army's banners planted here, they indeed seemed a bit desolate. After the banners were in place, Li Hao returned to the campfire. He took out some papers he had collected from the various tents, as well as his pen, ink, and inkstone, and began recording them one by one. "What are you doing?" Li Hongzhuang asked when she saw him. "Are you writing home?" Li Hao shook his head slightly. To whom would he send a family letter? The world was his home, and at this moment, this place was his home. These are the cultivation techniques of Listening Rain Tower. You intend to record the cultivation techniques? Record them and then return them to the Li family. Li Hao said with a smile. His expression, however, remained very calm. Li Hongzhuang thought of the matter between Li Hao and Li Tiangang, and her face slightly changed. "Do you really intend to completely sever ties with the family? Blood connections cannot be cut. There is nothing that cannot be severed." Li Hao's eyes narrowed and his tone grew colder. "Perhaps it's just that your sword isn't sharp enough." Li Hongzhuang picked up on the sting in Li Hao's words and raised her eyebrows, but she did not take issue with him. She understood that this child had just run away from home and was likely harboring great resentment in his heart. "But do you think that by recording the cultivation techniques, you will have returned them?" Li Hongzhuang said. Li Hao responded indifferently. "The techniques I return are all the original advanced versions, more than sufficient as compensation." Indeed, he intended to write down the deeper levels of understanding of the cultivation techniques he had realized and return them to the Li family. Even though by doing so the Li family would profit immensely, he did not bother to quibble over the matter. It was enough if he could sever the ties. "Oh." Li Hongzhuang was astonished and asked, "How many have you cultivated?" Advancing cultivation techniques requires tremendous energy and effort. If it were 1 or 2 techniques, it would be feasible, but if there were many, could he really enhance all of them to an advanced level? How much energy and time would that take? "Dozens, I suppose," said Li Hao offhandedly. He had already started writing the first technique, Stone Skin 100 Refinements Advanced Version, Golden Skin 100 Refinements, the original low-grade technique. Under the promotion of his 6th stage physical body path had evolved into a high-grade technique, strong enough to refine the body to be as tough as metal. Although he was at the same grandmaster realm as others, Li Hao's body, through these body-refining techniques, was more than 10 times stronger than an ordinary grandmaster. Moreover, Li Hao wrote down the profundity of the technique. Golden Skin 100 Refinements Vajra. It could burst forth instantaneously, increasing the body's defensive power several times over, if only for a short while. Its effect could be considered a semi-immortal, indestructible realm defense. Should he reach the indestructible realm and then use the Vajra profundity, the defense would be even more formidable. This profundity was not included in Stone Skin 100 refinements, so he did not consider it breaking his word about using techniques from the Li family. As for the enhancements brought to his body by Stone Skin 100 refinements and many other body refining techniques, he could not discard them, so instead, he used this more generous gesture as compensation. Dozens. When Li Hongzhuang heard Li Hao's words, she couldn't help but pause. She looked at Li Hao's face, solemn and serious in the light of the campfire, not seeming to joke. She was a bit dazed. At the age of 14, he had cultivated to the heavenly human realm and mastered dozens of techniques. In the years she had been away from the family, what kind of monster had the Li family cultivated? Suddenly, Li Hongzhuang's face changed, and she abruptly turned her head to look outside the camp. In the darkness of the night, there seemed to be clouds of darkness swaying, like shadows shaking in the woods. It looks like they know we have retreated. Murder flashed in Li Hongzhuang's eyes, and she grasped the hilt of the sword beside her. Li Hao also lifted his head and stopped writing. The wind carried a foul smell, that of demons. "Stay here, I'll be right back," Li Hongzhuang said as she got up and headed into the shadows. But Li Hao did not truly intend to wait here. His divine soul flew out from behind him, and in its vision, the night was as clear as day. He saw the figures of demons rushing toward the camp from the forest's tens of miles away. The surging waves of the hidden current spread through the bushes and over the rocks, closing in silently. There were not a few in number. Li Hao immediately put away his pen and the papers recording the cultivation techniques, handing them to Ren Qianqian. "Take care of these for me." Having already turned pale upon hearing Li Hongzhuang's words, Ren Qianqian said nervously, "Young master, are you going as well? Stay here. Feng will watch over you in secret." Li Hao glanced at the leaves wrapped up meat. Besides, he hasn't had his dinner yet. Smiling at the young girl, Li Hao then patted the little white fox's head and moved forward as he walked. He raised his hands slightly and broken short swords from all around began gathering towards him. He grabbed one of the less damaged swords in his hand, and the rest followed his figure forward. "Li Hongzhuang, the army has retreated, and you still dare to stay behind? Do you want to be buried with your soldiers? They are all in my stomach. Come and get them." Outside the campsite, a roar, like a tiger's bellow, erupted, revealing ferocious delight and a vicious atmosphere. Clearly, the chance to catch them was a delightful opportunity for it. "Qi Hu Jun," Li Hongzhuang, clad in bright red armor and wielding a 3-foot sword blade, stepped beyond the camp, her gorgeous face revealing an icy resolve. "You escaped last time, but I've been waiting for you. Haha. Did you think I would come alone? Faping. Come out and meet this Iron Lady." From the darkness, a huge tiger demon wrapped in chains appeared, a ferocious expression on its face. Chapter 170. With its roar, a dark cloud suddenly attacked from the night. Swish. Countless black feathers burst from the sky, assaulting Li Hongzhuang like a shower of arrows. Li Hongzhuang lightly tapped her toes and gracefully retreated, dodging the steel-like black feathers. She looked up at the enormous black bird, as big as a hill, her eyes also showing a hint of solemnity. "Kill!" Qi Hu Jun roared, giving the charge order from the distant wilderness. The ground shook, and numerous demons rushed forward, heading towards the pass. In front of the pass stood only a single figure of a woman in bright red. Wielding a sword, Li Hongzhuang's eyes were cold and sharp, showing no sign of retreat. The aura around her gradually built up, like a gathering storm. Swish, swish, swish. Countless flying stones and poisonous fog swiftly attacked from the forest, driven by the demons of the 15 Li realm, covering the campsite. Moreover, some demonic creatures emitted strange piercing screams, containing divine soul shocks that resonated on Li Hongzhuang. A golden divine soul appeared behind Li Hongzhuang, its hands forming seals, and with a forceful chant like the tolling of a bell, it shattered all the demon arts. At the same time, the divine soul waved its hands, stirring up a gust of wind that dispersed the incoming poisonous fog. Previously, with the army present, without her defense, these demon arts alone would have caused heavy casualties among the troops. Compared to these wave-like demonic creatures, Li Hongzhuang's attention was always on those two great demons. Soon, a multitude of demons arrived like rolling black smoke, like a ferocious tide of beasts, enveloping the skies and the earth, seemingly about to drown the figure in red. But suddenly, dragon-like hum of a sword resounded. The 3-foot green blade erupted with light, transforming into a giant sword, and fiercely slashed into the midst of the demons. In an instant, numerous demon corpses were severed and burst apart. But there were many demons, and Li Hongzhuang was quickly surrounded. She swung her sword in succession, slaying them, her body radiating golden light, blocking some of the attacks from the demonic objects. Suddenly, a black feather mingled with the demon's shot. Towards her, Li Hongzhuang's gaze sharpened. Prepared for the attack, she swung her sword forcefully, displaying the Li family's swordsmanship from endless sea-severing river. The sword's edge was heavy and forceful, as if it could split the earth, slicing the black feather in two simultaneously. A foul wind descended, Qi Hujun closed in, its enormous body simply with a paw the size of Li Hongzhuang's delicate form. Slamming down with a purple glow in its palm and lightning exploding, Li Hongzhuang swiftly countered with her sword, but was still knocked back by the strike. Faping in the sky suddenly attacked, spewing a jet of golden flames, faster than arrows, aiming for Li Hongzhuang's retreating position. A flash of golden light shone in Li Hongzhuang's eyes as she executed another cultivation technique. Breaking away, flames suddenly sprang from her sword edge, slashing out and dispersing the golden flames. As she acted, suddenly a sharp whistling sound charged at her, the onslaught coming with a sonic boom. It was a toothed demon with curved sharp fangs that burst out from the horde of demons. Upon seeing this demon, Li Hongzhuang's pupils slightly dilated, recognizing it as the 6-tusked sting pig that was on par with Qi Hujun, said to have the blood of an ancient demon king at this moment. It capitalized on the gap when she made her move, suddenly unleashing its power with precise timing. A fierce light shone in Li Hongzhuang's eyes as blood qi surged throughout her body. She swung her other fist with a punch that burst forth with invincible might. It was the half-step invincible fist, however. She had not perfected it. After all, that pinnacle step could only be understood by that old master himself. It wasn't that he refused to teach her, but that she couldn't display its essence, because this grandmaster cultivation technique was not something she comprehended herself with a bang. Her body flew backward, her punch negated after all. She was hastily responding to a concentrated attack, and now, with her blood qi in turmoil, she had sustained minor injuries. Qi Hujun and Faping quickly pressed their assault, giving Li Hongzhuang no chance to catch her breath. Li Hongzhuang could not afford to hold back any longer and unleashed unwithering power. She had already stepped into the third phase of the 3 immortal realms, the unwithering realm. At this moment, the unwithering power surged, all her blood qi suppressed, and boundless fierce strength poured out from within her. Her expression turned icy cold. Knowing they allowed Faping to appear specifically to lull her into thinking they were the only ones coming, while in reality they had also brought this pig demon. Swish. Suddenly, a sound of piercing the air attacked from behind. Li Hongzhuang's expression changed. Thinking it was an ambush, she quickly glanced back, only to be slightly startled. She saw several flying swords speeding towards her, aimed at the 2 attacking great demons, which were easily shattered by them with a flick of their claws. These flying swords, being incomplete, could not withstand the power of great demons even though they were made of tough precious metal. Are there others? The 3 great demons quickly turned their gaze to the rear. Qi Hujun's expression turned vicious. There's actually another brat? Heavenly human realm? Seeking death. They all saw a young man, sword in hand, approaching alone. Flip over all the tents for me. Qi Hujun roared angrily. To prevent others from hiding and playing tricks, demons surged into the campsite from all directions, tearing and destroying any battle flags at the boundary with no regard. Some tents were instantly ripped apart and demolished. Li Hongzhuang saw that it wasn't a sneak attack, but Li Hao coming to her aid. Her expression changed as she angrily shouted, "Get back." She had to focus all her attention on the 3 equal-ranked great demons, having no time to worry about Li Hao. "It's fine, you do your thing," said Li Hao calmly. Li Hongzhuang immediately became infuriated, but then she remembered He was lurking in the shadows. With him there, Li Hao wouldn't be in danger unless several immortals specifically targeted him. Immediately, she gathered her focus and charged at Qi Hujun first. Meanwhile, within the group of demons, several powerful and demonic figures suddenly soared away, rushing towards Li Hao. A demon with a serpent-like demonic aura coiling around its body shifted its shape into a fair-skinned beauty in a black dress, looking seductively at Li Hao. "Little brother, you smell so nice." "But you stink though," Li Hao said. The seductive woman in the black dress couldn't manage to smile while laughter erupted from the side. A hulking, rugged man strode towards Li Hao. "I'll be the first to have a taste." The energy within his body leaked out, forming the shadow of a giant ape behind him, towering over like a mountain. Li Hao glanced over at Li Hongzhuang, said no more, his gaze turning tranquil before suddenly releasing the energy within his body. The major arteries throughout his body violently pulsated, and his yin and yang dual pulse opened in an instant. With one step, the ground of the entire camp seemed to tremble and quiver. "What?" The burly man walking towards Li Hao changed his expression instantly, his face showing alarm. "What is this?" Li Hao had already rushed in for a sudden attack, his eyes cold as stars, and in a moment he was in front of the man, stepping halfway forward and pushing out a punch. The roar of the punch seemed to extinguish all the wind on the battlefield. Then came an explosive, howling punch fiercely slammed out. The burly man was terrified, his body abruptly swelling, black, thick and dense fur seeping out all over as he tried to reveal his true form, slapping his palms towards Li Hao and roaring, "Attack together." "He's not normal." With a bang, the palms shattered and burst, flesh and blood splattering, followed by the giant burly body being instantly penetrated. An invincible-like punch broke through the body, leaving a massive hole. This heavenly human realm great ape demon had not even had the chance to reveal its true form before it was killed by a punch from Li Hao. The seductive woman in the black dress had her bewitching smile instantly freeze, then her pupils contracted into serpent eyes. The remaining great demons also changed color as a demon wind suddenly rose, all showing their true bodies. Not daring to hide any longer, what kind of creature is this kid? A demon-possessed body? Damn it, let's join forces and kill him. Several demons, now all revealing fierce expressions, dared not to be careless and all charged at Li Hao together. The seductive woman in black dress transformed into a green-scaled viper with poisonous fog emitting between the green scales, sweeping towards Li Hao with a fishy smell. Another demon, a many-eyed giant deer, shot out a rainbow-colored divine light from its head, turning into a radiating flying sword slashing at Li Hao. Another, a purple-eyed mad bull demon, gathered a blood-red eye within its horns, reflecting Li Hao's figure as if it was some kind of special demon art facing the attacks. Of several demons, Li Hao did not take them lightly, his eyes showing a trace of coldness, his hand violently slashing out a sword chi with the broken sword edge. In the air, fragrant petals appeared to fall to the ground and then bloomed into blood-red seeds, birthing Manjusaka. Amidst the scattering petals, suddenly a huge and sharp sword chi slashed out. In an instant, the distance between Li Hao and the three giant demons seemed to be severed, the sword chi arriving in a flash. 3 streaks of blood spattered, and with a thump, the majestic head of the many-eyed giant deer fell, abruptly cut off. Simultaneously, under the sweeping sword chi, the waist of the green-scaled viper was sliced in two. The waist of the purple-eyed mad bull demon was cleanly cut open, leaving a deep gash. However, because the sword chi had consecutively cut through 2 great demons, by the time it reached this one, the momentum had slightly weakened, unable to cut through its body. Still, the 3 great demons' previously brewing terrifying presence instantly dissolved and crumbled. The 2 halves of the green-scaled viper's body writhed and tumbled violently, its screams of pain and terror fixated on Li Hao. From the body of the many-eyed giant deer, a fragmented divine soul rushed out, trying to escape into the distance, but a petal fell, turning into sword chi in a flash, eradicating its divine soul. "This isn't the heavenly human realm. Run, we can't hold against this." The head and tail of the green-scaled viper started fleeing separately in terror, retreating far into the distance. The purple-eyed mad bull demon's organs slid out, but it hastily shoved them back into its stomach using its power of material control. Its eyes turned from bloodthirsty madness to fear and pain, and it turned to flee, having struck down 3 demons with a single sword. Li Hao watched them attempt to flee and was not about to let them go easily, quickly pursuing them. However, his movement technique was not fast, being only at the 2nd stage, but he still had 1 skill point left. In the past, within the Divine General Mansion, Li Hao had no need for a movement technique, but at the frontier pass battling demons, the importance of movement technique became evident. Without hesitation, Li Hao immediately chose to allocate the point. Soon, his movement technique advanced to the 3rd stage. A flood of information rushed into his mind, and at the same time, his Fengxing movement technique progressed from pinnacle to its true form. With 1 step, Li Hao's figure seemed to be surrounded by condensing wings, adding to his speed.